Okay, so today we're going to work on creating a weather dashboard. We're going to use the openweathermap API. You might find that MetaWeather's API is down, and so openweathermap is another great alternative. So we'll give our spreadsheet a name. Now the first thing we need to do is we need to get data into our spreadsheet. So we're going to use SyncWith. SyncWith is an add-on that's available via the Google Workspace Marketplace. So you can click Get Add-ons, and you can find SyncWith in there. And basically, the SyncWith add-on will let you connect to essentially any API. There's literally thousands of APIs available, and so it's a great tool to get the data you need into Google Sheets. Now, it's pretty flexible in terms of how we search. So we could search for weather, and that'll help us find openweathermap, or we could have just searched for openweathermap, and that would get us to the API. Okay, so we're going to use the weather endpoint. This gets the current weather for one location. Use our API key. You can get your own API key. This API key won't work. You can try using it. OpenWeather lets you decommission API keys, which is a nice feature. So the query queue is another parameter that you pass into this endpoint. So an example would be you can pass in London. Click preview. So what preview does is it actually runs the API query. So it sends these two query parameters to the endpoint, and we get passed back the JSON. So this is the JSON response. But JSON is not super useful. We want to get this into a tabular format. So we can see, we can sort of use this tool to default expand all the JSON into rows and columns. And we can kind of see that as we expand everything, we get from this format into this format. So now we have our lat and long, rain, weather icons, temperatures. So we can click insert. We can either insert into a specific cell or just click insert. It's going to insert into a new sheet, so we can see our new sheet here with all the information. So this is interesting. We're only getting back the current day weather. If we want to get back more weather, so we can kind of rename this so the connection has a nice name. We'll just call this weather by city. And we'll update that. So again, this endpoint is using, or this connection is using the weather endpoint. We can go back to openweathermap, and we can use the one call. This will get a 7-day forecast if we want. So the interesting thing here is this endpoint requires a lat and long. So you can take the latitude here, add that. You can add the longitude for London, enter that there, add it, hit preview. And so now we can see we're getting back basically the same information, except this time, if you look in the data, there's an array here of minute-based precipitation. So this will actually give you the precipitation by minute. So you can see it's giving you many, many data points. It's also giving you hourly data points. So by hour, it's giving you humidity, pressure, temperature, the things feels like, the actual temperature. So it's passing back a lot of information. So we have an array of, we have the current temperature, we have an array showing temperature by weather by minute, weather by hour, weather by day. So we're going to take the weather by day. You notice as soon as we click that, it expands because it's actually giving us an array of data for the current day and the seven next days. So we don't want this data, we don't want the minute data, we don't want the hour data. You could pull these in separately. Right now we're just getting the daily information. So we'll expand these objects so that we just have a nice table view of all the daily data. So here's all our daily data. You can see there's a timestamp. There's sunrise, sunset, moonrise, moonset, moon phase, daily temperatures, min maxes, temperatures at night, temperature in the evening, morning, etc. Now we'll also notice that these look like they're in Kelvin, so we should probably change our units. Again, I'll pick a metric and add that. And if we refresh our preview, it remembers our transform. So that's great. So it's remembering the transform. And we can see that our temperatures are now in Celsius, in metric. So that's great. So again, we can give this a good name. We can call this current plus 7-day forecast. Okay, so we'll insert that. And again, it's going to create a new sheet called current plus 7-day forecast, which is where this connector is dumping data. And again, we can see that data in here. It's in a nice table. We don't have to worry about JSON. So let's say we want to get weather for many different cities. To do that, we need to know their Latin long. And so this weather endpoint that we used on this connector will return the Latin long for a city. So we're going to go here, we're going to insert a new column to the left, and we're going to just add a column called cities. And this is where you could sort of collect all the different cities you want to track the temperatures of. So we'll just add a bunch of cities here. So here's some big cities from around the world. And now we want to return the Latin long for all of these. So what we can do is we can go to weather by city. And right now this query parameter is hard-coded to London. We can actually do a cell reference here. So we can reference in the spreadsheet the data we want. We do that by clicking that cell reference icon. So we choose the sheet we want to get data from. We can choose the range. So here we're going to get from A3 through A16. That's basically this, A3 through A16. Okay. And we can see it's gathering the values we have listed in the spreadsheet. So we can apply that. So now what it's going to do is it's going to run the API multiple times, one per input. So now if we click preview, and of course, it's going to want our app ID. So click preview. Now we can see that we've passed in 14 requests. Now the preview window will only process the first 5 of the requests. And we can see we're getting that long back. We can see we have our input query here. So we always will repeat the query data. One thing we could do is just, we actually don't want the weather information here. So what we could do is just delete all these columns, because really we're just using this to get the lat long of the city so we can pass it in. So we're going to click update. Actually, we'll delete a few more things here. We don't really need them. We'll click update. And we'll click refresh to refresh that connection. And now we can see that we have a lat long and a city name. So now we have basically all the information we need to pass in lat longs here. So interestingly, we can also use a cell reference to pass in the lat longs for this. So we can go to the 7-day forecast, and maybe what we'll do is we'll repeat the lat longs on this sheet. So we're just going to insert some new rows to the left here, and we'll insert our lat longs. In fact, what we could do is we could actually take all this. So let's see, that's five columns. So we need a few more here. We'll just insert 2 more right here. We can actually cut this out and paste that there. And SyncWith is actually pretty smart. We could actually, it now knows, it will check that this is here, and it will detect. It will detect that we've cut and pasted this, and it will now update things in this spot. So, we could easily update this and pick a different city here. We could change this to Portland, and we could click refresh, and so there's a small issue here. Let's just check what that is. Preview. I think the geocode. So it's saying there's nothing to geocode, which makes sense. Although we cut and pasted this, it hasn't updated the cell reference. So we can easily update this cell reference. We still want A3 through A16, although it is now on a different tab. So we have to update that cell reference. And as soon as we update that cell reference, we click update. we will rerun the query and well, 32A16. Okay, so we're gonna, clearly something's happened, which, it's part of dealing with data and spreadsheets. So we're gonna preview this. We know that, here's our list of cities. That's our query. We're gonna preview that again. Okay, so we're getting the correct information back. So this looks good. We have a lat long, seems to be working. So we'll click update. Okay, and it worked this time. So can't really explain that. This refresh button again should work. Looks like everything's working properly now. Okay, so now we have a single sheet. These sheets are all sort of useless now. So we can just delete those sheets since they're not used. We now have two connectors. One is inserting data here, the other is inserting data here. Now we want to basically pass in multiple lat longs now to our 7-day forecast connector. So again, we can do that here. So just double checking, yeah. So we're doing latitude here. So latitude is located here. So C3 through C16. So we're going to go C3 through C16 and apply that. It will double check, show us the data in those ranges, which we confirm is correct. And then we're going to, we want to do the longitude now. So go here, use cell references. Now the longitude is between B3 and B16. That's great. And confirm. So now we have our lat long going in. Now we want to repeat the city name. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a query parameter. It doesn't really exist in this API, but it will help return the values that got passed in each query. So here we're going to use D3 through D16. That should give us all the city names. And make sure our API key is in there. So now we're going to preview. Okay, so we're getting back a lat long, time zone, current data, timely data, hourly data, daily data, and then this is interesting. So this is it. SyncWith always repeats back what you passed in. So for this particular query, we passed in this lat long, and then this city. So this is great. Again, let's be particular about what data we want. We don't need the current data. We don't need the minute data. We don't need the hour data. We'll expand the daily. So you can now see that it's expanded, and we have multiple rows for London, multiple rows for Toronto, Tokyo, Jakarta, and each of those rows corresponds to a date stamp. We want to expand all of these objects in the JSON so that we have everything as a column. We don't want to have any nested data in a cell. And I think that's it. So now we just click update, and it will now update this data. Might need to click refresh, tell it to run again. There we go. Sometimes there's a bit of a delay as it's running. So there we go. We have all the data back. It's inserted into our sheet. You can see we have about 114 rows, 8 days of data times 14. So it makes sense. And we're showing things in Celsius. Now let's say we want to build our dashboard. So what we would do is we choose all this data here. Okay, and we could insert a pivot table. Now, just one from F2, like we want to make sure that row 1 we're not getting because it doesn't have the columns, and pivot tables default to the first row representing the column. So we want to do F2. We'll put it on a new sheet. Okay, so now we have our new sheet here. The pivot table menu is hidden by this, so we just want to collapse that. So now we can see the pivot table column. And so for rows, we want to have one row per city name. So we'll choose city for rows, not daily moonrise. And now for columns, we want to have split our columns by date. Okay, so here's something that's interesting that's happening. We really should be only getting 8 dates, but we're getting a lot of dates back. And you can see that they've actually specified the date with a time in it, which is a little bit odd, but we can solve for that. So what we're going to do here is insert a column. Whoops. Just insert a column here to the left, just to give us a little helper column. So we'll call this simple date, because again, you can see that it's giving us a lot of date options, because the dates are not just a simple date, they also have a time component. So all you have to do is really round down, because the time within a day is a fraction of the day. So if we round the day down, we should get a simple date. So again, you see this, the date. Now, there's no time associated with this because we've rounded off the time, which is just a decimal. And we can repeat this with an array formula. You can also drag it down and this will always work. You can see that we actually, so, and then we can format that, give that some good formatting, the date. And so now, if we go here, we need to include column F. So we include column F in our range for the pivot table. And we change what we're splitting to columns. We choose simple date. We now see that we have many less dates. Now we want some filters here, because unfortunately you end up getting blank values, and because we changed things, we offset some of the columns. So we'll get that back to city and that back to date. Sort of being a little finicky. And we obviously don't want that date. And I think that's good. So now the value, so this is what's interesting. We have a lot of values we can pick from. And since we're graphing multiple cities, we kind of have to pick one of them. So we could be graphing humidity, we could be graphing, morning temperatures, evening temperatures. Let's look at nighttime temperatures, or let's look at max temperatures. So the first thing you'll see here that's kind of interesting is Jakarta is ahead a day, so you're getting that 8-day range kind of shifted. And we have totals here. Totals don't really make sense. Let's get rid of those. And yeah, now we can graph this. So we can select this data. We can insert a chart. And we'll switch the rows and columns. We'll set the labels properly, and we'll chart it out. And there we go. So maybe we'll turn on compare mode here for the chart. And now you can kind of see, just how hot Delhi is compared to, Paris. That's the max temp. Now, we could duplicate this entire pivot table, and we could change that to, daily min temperatures. So that's, and then again we could chart the mins. So insert chart. Basically just turn all those on. And now we have the mins. So, very interesting. You can see that in LA, the highs get very close to Jakarta, or actually go above. But the mins in LA are much lower. You have, clearly very low cool points. 16 degrees is, you can have your windows open, and that's pretty cool. versus a max of 24 degrees, which is, you know, pretty warm. And that's it. That's how to pull in free weather data via API. Here we used openweathermap. We used SyncWith. We had 2 connectors, one to help us get the lat and long by city, and one to get the forecast. And that's it.